are. Colombia, Honduras, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, Mexico, Honduras, Venezuela, Peru. Look at the joy the little girl has. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Don't stop. Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Ecuador. Here, represented at River. It's raining here on the West Coast. Rain isn't very common here in California, but here we have a full house. Mexico, come on, come on, don't stop. Asia, Africa, Australia, Europe. Receiving this live stream. Thank you for being there. Please rest, battalion. Thank you for being there. Thank you. We're ready. We're punctual. We're transmitting live to the rest of the world that has been waiting for us because they're fed from the messages that come from here. I'm going to tell now the people at home that here we've sung, we've worshipped, we've celebrated. Here there's an atmosphere that is wow. And you always ask, well, why don't you transmit it? Well, there are things that have to be reserved to live them here live. And some people might be saying, yeah, but I'll never have the opportunity to go. I know, but there are things that the screen or the live stream will never do justice to what is lived here. And so there are things that have to be lived here. You have to feel them, from the aroma to the atmosphere to what is felt. All the people that come say it's very different to what you sometimes see a little video of, and we want that to be conserved. So we honor all those that come from an early hour, those that were waiting in line under the rain. May God bless you, all those heroes and heroines with umbrellas. It doesn't rain often here, however. They were there saying I can't miss out, and I'm about to transmit what I believe God told me to tell you. Today, as always, after a trip, I'll show you a few images, short images, about a minute and a half of what happened. I was in Neuquén. Neuquén is near Patagonia in Argentina, as I always say. It's a long, long trip. We travel from here to Dallas, and from Dallas to Argentina is about 11 hours from Buenos Aires to another 2-hour trip to fly to Neuquén, and in Neuquén we had 4 presentations, 4 events. One day at 5 p.m. and at 9 p.m. and the next day same thing, 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. All 4 were full. This happened because when we announced the conference, the first event sold out in 10 minutes. And we said, well, there must be a mistake. It has to be a robot that bought them all together. But no, these were people that were waiting. And they sold out in 10 minutes. So we had another event to see what happened, and that one sold out in 15 minutes. And we got a ticket, and we say, oh, hallelujah, God is here. This never happened. This is the first province where this happens. We added a third event. We didn't know where else to squeeze it in. So we added a third event at 5 p.m. and it sold out in 15 minutes. And the fourth one sold out in 20 minutes. So we could have stayed all week in Neuquén. Neuquén is a province with many, many resources where there's a lot of lithium and petroleum, a lot of crude oil. But the people arrived early nonetheless. I think this is the second to last tour date. We're about to finish. We just arrived yesterday, and it was marvelous. Here it is.
Emocionadas, nerviosas, de todo.
Hace un año que estamos esperando.
Y estamos muy felices, vinimos a cumplir un sueño.
Estamos con muchas expectativas.
Muchas ganas de verlo, de escucharlo. Han dicho un montón de cosas lindas de su show, así que esperemos llenarnos como ellos.
Y agradecida porque llegó acá a la Argentina y especialmente a Neuquén.
Una noche hermosa, inolvidable.
Fue un sueño cumplido verlo a Dante.
Nos llevamos de una experiencia hermosa.
Felices, una noche hermosa, llena de emociones, alegrías, llanto. La verdad que esta noche me colmó el corazón, el alma, todo. Me voy inmensamente feliz.
Hermoso show, hermosas palabras.
Me encantó, fue una montaña rusa de emociones.
Nos reímos mucho, conmovió mucho nuestro corazón.
Nos reímos, lloramos, vivimos emociones muy lindas.
El presidente ha dejado un hermoso mensaje que realmente es lo que queremos vivir en el día a día, así que gracias.
from Neuquén, we send you an enormous greeting to all the people from the South. Some of you just saw yourselves in the video and you're watching it from home, so thank you. I insist. We had 4 presentations. During the 4th presentation, I thought to myself, what were we thinking? Because it's 2 hours 40 minutes, 2 hours 30 minutes of me speaking without any music, nothing. So for the 4th presentation, I was saying, Lord, you'll have to give me supernatural strength. And there I remembered that many of you were praying for me, and so I thought, well, people are praying for me, so forgot to give me strength and health, so thank you very much. Because then I had to return here and also bring this message. Very well, as we say every Sunday, those that have cell phones, please be sure to put them on airplane mode or turn it off to not distract yourself and to honor your own time and to honor the people around you. Secondly, if a child begins to cry or if they get fussy, quickly, Mom and Dad, take them to the nursery. Help me out. The nursery is available for you to tend to your children. Our uniformed personnel will guide you there. The nursery is a place where the mothers and fathers can clean their babies, calm them down a little bit. You'll find everything necessary for the baby. If the child is a little bit older, I'm sorry for being so repetitive, but there are many people visiting us. Remember, you can go to the family theater where you'll find a big screen there while your children play in the middle there, have some fun, and you'll be able to follow along with the service. With that being said, are we ready for God to speak to us? Yes? Very well. There are 2 or 3, but all the rest will have to get ready during the trajectory. Well, about 20 years ago, 20-something years ago, God allowed me to realize an extensive tour for many months in diverse states in Mexico. I didn't have the team that we have now, nor the logistics that we now fortunately can count on. And so I remember that I would arrive from Argentina in a commercial plane, obviously, to what is now Mexico City, the old federal district. And we would take off from Mexico City in a small plane with a pilot. And we would go to Merida, Mexico. We would go to so many different places, Tijuana, of course, but we would always connect on those small planes because there was no way to take a commercial plane and to go through 4 or 5 cities in a week on those commercial flights. I don't know how 20 years ago they were able to convince me that flying in that small plane was safe, but the truth is that I decided to trust my life and my destination in the hands of that pilot. Everything depended on his character, on his capacity. If you're watching me, I send you a greeting if he has still survived. On our first flight, the first time we flew, we introduced each other, we greeted each other, and to make conversation, I asked him how he used to earn a living before he was a pilot, and how he began to fly planes, these small planes, because the pilot was a man who appeared to be about 57, 58, maybe 60 years old. And I expected him to say that his previous occupation was full of important responsibilities. I don't know, maybe a neurosurgeon or an astronaut from NASA that couldn't go to space any longer due to his age, but I realized there was a problem when he confessed to me that he had gotten his license to fly planes less than a year ago, and that before flying planes, he would drive a tractor fertilizing fields. With the greatest respect that a tractor driver deserves, he went on to tell me that one day he was backing up his tractor. He had had too many shots of tequila, and so he accidentally ran over one of his owner's cows, and they fired him immediately. He said, once word spreads, they never hire you again. And since he was left without a job, he decided to get his pilot's license, and he decided to fly short domestic flights, and I was his first client. And so suddenly, it clicked that I was the first client of a tractor driver that kills cows, was fired for drinking on the job, and now he's been flying for less than a year. But things got worse. I've shared this on other occasions. We began to hear gunshots in the air. You could feel the explosions around the plane. At first, it felt like a tank of propane, but then we realized that they were gunshots, people shooting from the ground. And so we said, I remember I had the headphones on, the over-ears, that isolate you from the sound, but you can hear what the control tower is saying and what the pilot is saying, and he began to say, "Oh man, no way! Ah, this is getting ugly." Apparently, it's the drug dealers, but be calm. I don't think they're shooting us. He took the radio and said, control tower, please confirm who these shots are aimed at." I almost had a heart attack then and there. And so I asked myself, why am I here? Why did I accept the invitation? This church can survive without me. And the guy looked at me and said, look, the truth is we won't face anything that I haven't dealt with before. This is Mexico, brother. Trust in me and enjoy the flight. And I said, oh yeah, right. And he said, you do what you know how to do something religious, and I'll do what I do, which is flying. When he told me to do something religious, I almost lifted up an offering. In a moment like this, the great question is always reduced down to, can I trust in the pilot? Because in that moment, you have to say that you can trust in him. Of course, independent of you knowing that you're trusting in God, but remitting back to the story, I asked myself, do I trust in this pilot? Does this guy truly know what he's doing? These are all the things that ran through my mind. Does he have the character and the capacity for me to trust in him? Because at no point did he get shaky, nor was he doubtful. No, he continued to fly the plane calmly as if it were his tractor. He said, what can be worse than killing a cow with my tractor? Oh, well, maybe killing the guy behind me. The truth is that I had no option, and if I wanted to make it to my destination, I had to take the risk of flying between faith and fear. You have faith that you will make it, but you also have the fear that you may not. And when I think back on memories like this, I always think, what was I thinking? I don't know if at this age I would take these risks, because you become more cautious. But I also confess that I'm more fearful and timid, because as you age, you realize that these risks are things that you didn't measure when you were younger. There are roller coasters that I wouldn't get on these days, not even by court order, because there's a sign that says, if you have heart problems, or if you think you have heart problems, this is not a ride you should get on. And of course, how do you find out that you have heart problems? Well, up there. The sign says you might have neck pain after, or you might have whiplash due to the roller coaster. Now I say, I measure things more now, and I think that happens as you grow older. When you're 30, you say, oh, well, this Superman roller coaster, they say that 2 carts flew off last week, but I'll try it. But as you get older, you start to measure things more, and I was thinking, what was going through my mind 20 years ago when I decided to trust in a man that I didn't know, a man that had just gotten his pilot's license? The host surely hired him because he wasn't charging too much. I don't know, but the truth is that due to experiences like this, I was always attracted by the story of Peter, of when he walked on water with Jesus, because that was also a walk that had both ingredients, faith and fear, and both appear in the story, right? A story that is very popular. Peter and his companions got into a small boat to cross the Sea of Galilee. Jesus wanted to be alone, and so they set sail without him. He said, I'll catch up. But a ferocious storm comes along. It wasn't just a little bit of rainfall, no. It was so bad that the only thing the disciples could do was survive, remain afloat. At about 3 a.m., I can imagine that they were no longer worried about making it to the other side. They just wanted to continue alive. It was already a reward to remain alive. Like when a pilot's plane is coming down and he says, all I have to do is land this plane. That's how the disciples were living. So one of the disciples notices a shadow in the waters that is moving direction towards them. At first they think that it's a ghost, but then they began to see that it was like a human figure. The disciples were convinced, obviously, that they were seeing a ghost apparition, yes? And so they felt terror, They shouted out in fear, and it's interesting to observe that the disciples originally got on the boat by Jesus' orders. They had to learn, just like us, that obedience to the Lord is not a guarantee to avoid adversity or storms. I've spoken about this often, and I'm going to insist with the topic. There are people that say, if this were from God, I wouldn't be going through what I'm going through now. If God wanted me to be in this relationship or in this job or in this ministry, I would not have the problems that I'm having now. It's like a collective a subconscious that makes us believe that when we're obeying God, adversities go away. This comes from the root of the fallacy of hearing, God will make us live from victory to victory. And you repeat these words, repeat with me, victory. But for there to be victory, there has to be a war, there has to be a battle, there has to be adversity, there has to be storms. Without a storm, you never value the calm moments. And calm and low tide are valued after you've gone through the storm. This isn't something that awakens amens. I'm not expecting you to say amen. But man, there is no peace if first there is not a storm. These gentlemen had to learn that they were close to the pilot, and that pilot was the one in charge. Though they could not see the pilot, he was in charge. He was at the wheel, and they had to trust in him. That's what it's about. The Lord appears to them and says, trust in me, gentlemen. In other words, you know my character. Your destiny is in my hands. Nothing will happen to you. Now, on that boat, 12 disciples were traveling. We don't know how 11 of them reacted when they realized that it was not a ghost after all, that it was Jesus. Maybe they reacted with admiration, or maybe incredulously, or maybe both ways. Maybe they had a bit of admiration and incredulity. Maybe they were thinking, this cannot be happening. But one of them, Peter, was about to become the first human being to walk on water. He recognized the Lord's presence in the most unusual of places. Here's another parenthesis. Recognizing God's presence in a place like this, or watching it via live stream, it's not a great discovery because we say, I'm going to watch this sermon so that God can speak to me. Or I go to the arena to receive spiritual nutrients. Or recognizing God in unusual places such as a hospital, the hallways, the corridors of a hospital, or in the worst of cases, the metal bed in a hospital, or the freshly cut grass of a cemetery. Recognizing God there. Recognizing God in a chemotherapy room, or in a room where you get dialysis. That's very different from you saying, oh, I felt God's presence today while we worship. But here's what's happening to Peter. He's recognizing God in an unusual place. So an idea occurs to him. He says, if it's you, then command me to walk on this water. If it's you, then why don't you make me walk on the water as well? Why would Matthew, or in this case the Bible, why would it include this detail? That Peter says, if it's you, then command me to walk on the water. I mean, why didn't Peter simply dive in, expecting to be able to walk on the water? Why didn't he jump out of the boat without saying, if it's you, command me, give the order? Why does he ask for that order? It's Jesus that's there. He must be thinking, oh, it's Jesus. He won't allow me to drown. It's him. He'll save me. Why is Peter asking for an order? Why? And I think that this is for a very important reason. This is not a story on how to run risks, how to take risks. No, it's the essence of a story of obedience, not of taking risks just because, but a story of obedience, which means that we should always discern between an authentic calling from God, a genuine call from God, and what might simply be one of our own stubborn impulses or just mere stupidity. There are many people that drown because they get off the boat, and they don't drown due to a lack of faith, but because nobody ordered them to get off that boat. They sent themselves. That's what you call viral stupidity or learned stupidity. People that say, "Oh, well, I believed in faith and I quit my job for God to sustain me." But He didn't send you to do anything. What I'm about to tell you now, God knows this is not comedy. I'm not trying to make it funnier than what it really was. I never make this clarification, but it's necessary because then people will be asking, "No, there's no way." During one of my first trips to Spain, a pastor friend who was hosting me in Spain, he said, "I want you to accompany me to visit Pastor so-and-so. I'll preserve their name due to good taste and ethics." But the post pastor said, "I want you to accompany me to go and visit this pastor who's in the hospital. But don't get scared. Don't be alarmed. His whole body's in a cast. Everything's fractured. All his ribs are broken." And I asked him, "Wait, but is he alive?" Yeah, he's conscious. And I asked him what happened to him. And he said, "Well, I'll let him tell the story." And I said, "No, come on, give me a hint because you never know." And he said, No, he'll tell you. It was a car accident." And I asked, "Oh, okay, well then why so much mystery?" And he said, "Well, let him tell you." So we went to the hospital. This Argentinian pastor, knowing what would happen, said, "Well, I'll leave you two alone to speak, to have conversations." And I said, "All right." So I asked the pastor, "How do you feel? I mean, from what I can see, you're probably terrible." He looked like the mummy. He couldn't move. And he said, "Well, God has failed me." Okay. Well, yeah, it's the reasoning, the conclusion that you arrive at when these misfortunes happen. He said, "Well, no, I mean, He truly failed me. Look, I had just finished preaching. I had preached in 4 different places without stopping. Just like me, like I did this week." He said, I preached Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Friday was a far away place, so I went in my car. And on my way back, I was so tired that if I were to pull over and sleep, I wouldn't make it to the next day's service. So I let go of the wheel, I began to sleep, and I said, 'Angels, sleep. Angels, drive.' And he drove off a cliff. They had to get him out almost in pieces. And he said, 'Why do we have angels if you can't order them?' And I said, okay. Pastor, when did they tell you that the angels would drive for you?" And he said, "Well, there's no need. I commanded them, and these lazy angels didn't want to drive for me." But he wasn't even driving a Tesla. And so that day I learned, I send a greeting to this pastor. If he's watching, I don't think he'll ever invite me back to Spain. But that day I learned that there are commands from God and there are stupid acts. And when you get off the boat, and if you want to sleep and tell the angels to drive without there being a command from God, then the result may simply be a 6-7 month stint in the hospital. Risk in and of itself is useless if it's not done out of obedience. And sometimes as evangelicals we have the habit of justifying everything in the name of the Lord. Saying, "Oh, or is God not powerful? I'm going to do such and such. Is God not powerful enough to sustain me?" Yes, of course He is if He wants, but if we don't receive an explicit command from God, He has no obligation to sustain us because He's not just a genie in a lamp. Jesus is not looking for people that jump off bridges, pilots that fly with a blindfold, or any other sorts of kamikazes. So this is not a story about extreme sports. No, it's a story of discipleship and obedience. Command me to get off of this boat. Peter is trying to make sure that Jesus is also thinking that it's a good idea to get off that boat. And I'll say it again. Before you get off the boat, you'd better be sure that Jesus also agrees that it's a good idea for you to get off that boat. If not, don't do it. Lord, I want you to give me the command. If you command me to, I'll do it. And if I die, then I'll die by God's orders. I died under what's called, in military terms, life obedience. But in the end, we were following commands. We're not just crazy people that went out as if we were a suicide squad. So God is not going to bless those that are trying to commit suicide. No. He is wanting to us to follow a command. That's why he asks with clarity. If it is you, command me. The most important phrase is not, if it is you. I think all 12 disciples knew it was him. The most important phrase was, command me, give me the order. It was already difficult enough to try and walk on the waters calmly. It's already hard enough to walk on the water with sunlight and calm waters. But now, imagine trying to walk on water while you're terrified. The waves are raging. There's a storm going on. It's 3 a.m. and you can't see anything. Now, if we were there in the midst of a ferocious storm, what would we choose? The boat or the water? What's more logical? The water or the boat? At least the boat for now is safe. It hasn't capsized. Yes, it's moving like a nutshell. But there are 11 other guys on there. On the other hand, the water is raging, and there's no one in the water other than the master. So if we leave the boat, there's a great probability of drowning. That probability never disappears. If I'm going to preach in a place in Mexico with a pilot that kills cows with tractors, then most likely I will make it. But there's also a probability that I may not make it. I've never gotten on a plane, not even a commercial airline, the safest ones in the world. None of them have ever assured me 100% that I would make it to my destination. Anything can happen, even when we drive a vehicle. Now, if we don't leave the boat, then there is an assured guarantee that we'll never walk upon the waters. I can avoid flying on a plane. I can say, no, I'm too scared to fly on a plane. And there's a certainty that there are certain places that you can only get to on a plane that I'll never be able to go to. I can say, I hate cars. Other people can drive, as if the other person won't crash. The Uber driver, or the taxi driver, or the bus driver, they all have that same possibility that we have if we were to be behind the wheel. So this is a principle that never fails. To walk on the water, you have to get off the boat. If not, you cannot walk. But there's always something within us that tells us that life is more than just navigating on calm waters on a small sailboat. Some of us say, oh, my dream is to just have my own home and a little car and a little grill to have a barbecue. Those that say these things, no, at a certain point you have to say, no, there has to be more to life than this. We were made for something more than just avoiding failure, than just avoiding tragedy. There's like a gene that God places in us of adventure, of wanting to create, of wanting to do, to advance. We all have that gene, whether dormant or semi-awake or awake, but we all have that gene. Now, we have to ask ourselves, how long has it been since we haven't taken any risks? And if we like life to be too calm, it's because we have not left our boat. So what is our boat? Our boat is anything that represents security and tranquility besides God. Our boat is anything that represents calm besides God. Our boat is anything that we may be tempted to trust in, especially when life gets stormy. That's our boat. Anything that keeps us comfortable, even when Jesus is inviting us to walk with him on the waves. When Jesus tells us, I want you to take risks, this requires a risk. And if we don't want to, it's because we still have not recognized that there is a boat that is keeping us safe. Do we truly want to know what our boat is? Well, our fear will tell us what that boat is. I didn't think that I had any boat until my fear told me about it. We all have a boat. We just have to ask ourselves, I insist, what is it that produces the most fear in me when I think about leaving it behind and walking forward in faith? What would I not be able to leave behind? What could I not live without? You might say, I can't live without him, I can't live without her, or without them, in the case that they're your children. I met a gentleman whose boat is his job, his occupation. It's not wrong to have an occupation and a vocation. Of course, it's marvelous. The point with this gentleman is that is his boat of security. And he worked almost his entire life in the same company. And that's also not a bad thing, but it's just that he always confesses that he felt a sensation that God was calling him to do something greater, to serve him. That his destiny was not to just fabricate whatever he fabricated, that he was destined to manage greater things for the kingdom because of his capacity. However, he fell to his conscience, offering great sums of money to the church, but he was never able to take away the fear that he never dared to follow his calling, and he knows that maybe now it's too late. He did receive a command of get off the boat, but he did not want to obey, and something eats away within him. He says, now I'm an older man, and now I don't have the desire, now that I have grandchildren, to take a risk that I should have taken long ago. I met a woman whose boat is her relationship. For years, she's been involved with a man that never has the initiative to do anything. And it's fine for all women to have a certain maternal instinct. Sometimes they want to be daughters, almost like a toy for that man. There are moments where they need to be contained, listened to, heard. But then sometimes they have the maternal instinct of wanting to take care of and protect that man, when that man is nothing more than a child in an adult's body. But when the pattern is continual, the wife, instead of having a man, she has a little boy to take care of. That if she doesn't push him, he won't work. If she doesn't push him, he won't look for employment. He has no initiative to do anything. He avoids talking about the future. And in any case, in the worst of cases, he makes the woman feel like a simple object that he uses when he feels like it. That woman begins to get fed up. In this case, she knows that she has no future there, but she does not believe that she can manage the situation of losing him. And so her boat has been seesawing for years, but she's too afraid to leave him. She feels that the worst thing that could happen to her is to be alone, and so even though her husband cheats on her, and even though he's the worst, she will continue there, because in one way or another, that's her boat. The boat that symbolizes legality in the country, the boat that symbolizes tranquility, or at least in an economic sense. And she asks herself, whoa, where will I live? I don't know, but what I do know is right now you're living in hell. It's a sure hell, but hell nonetheless. Maybe the other option can either be a probable hell or your salvation. I got to know a pastor that was leading a congregation that was plagued by division and gossip. That's why they say small group, big hell. And instead of leading the church with a clear vision, his efforts are focused on placating and pleasing all the upset members so that they don't leave. The 30 or 40 that tithe every week. But this man will never change. He won't change because that's his boat and that's his style on how to be at the wheel, to placate and keep the people within the church happy. If he changes, or if he leaves it behind, he doesn't know what else he could possibly do. So that's his boat. He knows that he's not producing, that he's not effective, that he's not growing, but it's his boat, his little boat. His little church every Sunday tells him, "We love you, Pastor." And every year they celebrate his birthday. I know somebody else whose boat is a secret, pornography. He says that it's a harmless addiction, a way to clear his mind and to let go of stress. It's not something that has cost him his job or his marriage, but nobody knows it. He's afraid to admit it, but it's killing him from within. That boat is his refuge. That is his boat. The boat of a woman that I know is her mother. With the objective of keeping her happy, she does whatever she wants from her. She should be looking towards her own future, but she feels a guilt and a burden that her mother was able to place on her like an emotional terrorist. And so now the daughter feels that she must always please her mother, that the boyfriends that she chooses must please her mother, that if she wants to go into a career, her mother must approve of it. And nothing that this woman does is ever enough to please her mother. But the thought of contradicting her mother terrifies her, and that's her boat. She can be getting off that boat towards a future of what God has for her, but there is a boat that has her tied up. This is not the best thing. This is not the life that I dreamt of, but it's a life. For the young rich man in the Bible, his boat was success. In his case, he had a yacht. He traveled well, and he liked it far too much to leave it behind. Sometimes I ask myself what the young rich man thought when he made it to the end of his life, now as an old man, and his bank account, his portfolio of stocks, and his display of trophies were full. I mean, did he ever remember the day in which Jesus Christ himself called him to bet it all and follow God's kingdom, and he said no? Now that he has to go to eternity, and now that he has to leave this world naked just as he arrived, did he ask himself if it was worthwhile to accumulate all those things? Because he forgot that because of the law of entropy, all things will rot in the great democracy of decomposition. I know many people that decide to not leave their boats. They say, no, I'll stay in my little boat. They don't even have the courage that they had years back when some crossed the border in search for a better future. And immediately the system wrapped them up. And now what they're taking care of in a craze is their credit, their car, their health insurance, things that maybe some of us didn't even have before. And I'm not saying that it's wrong implicitly. No, we just didn't have them. And even then, we moved forward. I remember coming to this country, hired as the Hispanic pastor at the Crystal Cathedral, where the Americans managed the money. And when I would ask, I want to evangelize, we want to be on TV so that the church grows, or I want to have conferences, they would hold a meeting with me and the accountant and a consultant, and they would say, let's look at the Excel spreadsheet, and let's see what budget we have, and according to the budget, you can do whatever you want. This is the United States of America. And I said, all right, I'm not coming here to implement my Hispanic culture in the U.S. I agree. But after 3 or 4 months, where if there was no budget for toilet paper, we couldn't go to the bathroom, I began to realize that God is not an Excel spreadsheet. That I spent 40 years in my Argentina living by faith without any Excel spreadsheets, without any accountants, trusting in that God was saying, get off the boat because I am with you. If I send you, I will provide. If I command you, I sustain you. God is an informed God that knows how much it costs when he sends you to do something. I know many people that decide not to leave the boat because there are no guarantees. This is a marvelous country for foreigners and for immigrants. But sometimes it goes against us when we begin to develop an American mind, when sometimes certain things will never be Americans, just like how Americans will never be Hispanics, but there are things that begin to get implanted in our minds, and we begin to think within a box. The good thing about us is that since our countries are like quicksand in the government, we've gotten used to thinking outside of the box. And anything that we do, we have plan A, plan B, plan C, all the way to plan Z. We figure it out, but at a certain point, the system takes over us. And that system, which may not eject us, but it also cannot swallow us, it makes us think that if there are no guarantees, we won't believe. Let me tell the people from around the world that we're in a country, we're in a state where it rains maybe once or twice a year, and where 99% of people here have cars different to our countries. But when it rains, they don't take their cars out so that they don't get wet, or because it's dangerous to drive on the highway. We would take 3 buses, 3 trucks, just to get to church, with umbrellas that would flip inside out. Because there in Argentina, it rains sideways. Here it rains with style. Right? We were wearing our boots, walking through the puddles, our umbrellas upside down. I would ask my mom, are we going to church today at training? And I would say, but I don't feel like it. And she would say, well, you'll go not feeling like it. Period. How can it be that our mind begins to change so much? Well, there's no guarantees that life within the boat will be pleasant and nice. If only things went well if we stayed on the boat. We can become vegan, we can avoid carbohydrates, never drink coffee, never go to bed after 8 p.m., not have a mother-in-law, not stay up late. We can avoid all controversial topics to not offend anybody, only spend what's necessary, save up all that we can, and even then, we can slip in the shower and die. You can go, ah! And the person that had no mother-in-law still died. A philosopher of science, Larry Loudon, studied for 10 years all the things that he calls risk management, and he concluded that everything in life, everything carries a risk. Nothing is exempt of risk. If we look for absolute certainty, then we're of the wrong species. There is no total certainty in our species or on this side of the sun. Everything can fail, from the Titanic, the unsinkable ship, to the latest generation planes and jets. Even the projects that send missiles or rockets or spaceships into space. Nothing, not even if NASA backs it, nothing is completely certain. You can say, oh, I'm going to never leave my bed. But you might be one of those million people every year that goes to the hospital because they fall from their beds. We can cover our windows to not see the outside world, but that can make us one of 10 people that accidentally choke themselves, kill themselves with the blind cords. So the truth is, there's always danger when we leave the boat, but there's always danger if we stay within the boat as well. The danger of what could have been. I'm terrified of that. My father was always a great carpenter, but he was a higher level of a carpenter. He was a master carpenter. Those that can make works of art out of wood. He would literally make fake plants, and after carving them and shaping them, he could make furniture, almost Baroque furniture, that is sold very, very expensive in the business of wood or fine furniture. And my father was a master carpenter. He had a great talent, and somebody came along and said, look, Federico, let me propose to you. You put your talent and I'll put the money, and we're going to make a great business, a great company. He said, no, because that'll demand more efforts from me. And they said, no, it's just that instead of leaving at 2 p.m. to take a nap every day, sometimes you have to work until 5. They were asking him for 3 more hours, and my father said, what about my nap? I'm not saying always, but some days you'll have to stay because you're no longer an employee waiting for it to be 2 p.m. Sometimes when we'll have to give merchandise or make a sale, you have to stay. But just at the beginning, because then later on, we'll have employees that will learn your job. And he said, all right, let me think about it. Finally, he said no. He said, no, I prefer my naps. And he said, in the end, it's complicated. And what if it goes wrong? Well, the result is that this gentleman, as he saw that my father did not accept, he proposed it to another carpenter with much less talent. But now they're both millionaires. They have a business of carpenters. They're millionaires, and their children are millionaires. And so if we choose to grow, that implies that there will be fear. Fear and growth go hand in hand, like tortillas and tacos, like mother-in-laws and misunderstandings. They go hand in hand. It's a package. But the majority prefers to submerge themselves in comfort. There's an entire culture of vegetating on a couch, watching TV, drinking beer. Not too long ago, an interview that I had with Cristian Castro went viral. He said that he recommends to do nothing. He says, I don't do anything. And I asked, what do you mean nothing? He says, yeah, nothing. So I asked, if I go to your house, Christian, and you invite me to do nothing, what are we going to do? Nothing. But nothing implies something, drinking something. No. We don't drink anything because that implies doing something. So what will we do? Nothing. Are we going to watch TV? No, that's doing something. I love to do nothing. Well, explain to me how you do nothing. He said, okay, for example, look at this table, and, well, I can spend hours doing that, doing nothing. It got viral. 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 It went viral because they said the new doctrine of Christian Castro, do nothing. And there are many that followed along. It became viral because many people liked it. An entire generation said, that's my life. I want to do nothing. That's the drug addiction of this generation, to be boat addicts, addicted to the boat. In fact, it's corroborated that the majority of women are exasperated when they're with a man that has no initiative. It's exasperating because women were created by God. When this is under the submission of man, it's not to follow orders, but to be contained under that man's purposes, under that man's initiatives. That she not have to worry all the time about their income, all the time if tomorrow they'll have a roof over their heads. There's a time where a moment where that woman has to feel calm and peace, not just because she married Tony Stark, but because the husband will not allow anything bad to happen because he has initiative. Millions of people in churches these days can also call themselves seat addicts. They want a little bit of comfort, they want a positive message, a little bit of faith, but they don't want to take on the risk of following Jesus on the water. But Jesus continues to seek people that want to get off the boat. He's continuing to look for people that say, I want to take that risk. When I was younger, we would go visit my grandmother, and I remember that nobody could open up an old trunk that he had. A trunk similar to what we see in the pirate movies. A curved lid, and she said that there she stored away things that had a high value, and when her grandchildren would come over, we always dreamt of opening up the trunk because we thought there were millions of dollars in there. We didn't know, but when they finally sold that old home, my grandmother was obligated to opening up that trunk, and there she kept a very, very fine set of porcelain. The porcelain was translucent, just like the high quality ones are, made of kaolin and quartz. In the Baroque style blue series, underneath the teapot was the following inscription: Royal Porcelain Factory Philip Rosenthal, Upper Franconia, Germany. And so we found out that the manufacturer was the finest porcelain factory in all of Europe and in the entire world. And so why had no one ever seen that porcelain before? Well, to answer that question, you'd have to get to know the character of Europeans, those that survived the war. In that home, for example, my grandmother had a dining room that was very, very fine and elegant. It was the nicest room in the entire house. It was the dining room. But whoever went over, no matter who it was, they would never eat in the dining room. They would always eat in the kitchen on a small table with all the fumes of the ravioli that intoxicated you. The dining room was reserved for very special guests, and since nobody was special enough, that dining room was never used. Never. In the case of the porcelain set, my grandmother would take it out from time to time to clean it, and since it was very valuable, and if it was used, it could break, she would wrap it up in newspaper again and put it back in that trunk for a special occasion. And we realized that from time to time she would say, oh, it's time for me to clean my porcelain, and she would clean it to put it away again because the occasion of using it never came. Besides, my grandmother was never invited to Buckingham by Queen Isabel to be able to say, oh, let me take my porcelain there. No. And so my grandmother went to her tomb without ever using those valuable relics. And so every time that we're given a gift or a talent, those of us that receive it, we should choose from one of two options. The first is to think that that gift and that talent is so valuable that it's not worth risking it. And so we assume that if we take that gift out of its packaging, it's possible that things won't turn out well. And yeah, that's a great possibility. It can be undervalued by others, misused, or even be broken. Taking it out of the box always exposes us to risk. Always. The second decision is to think that that gift, that talent is so valuable that that's exactly why it should be exposed to risk. Because if we don't take it out of its packaging, it will never be utilized. Leaving a gift within its packaging frustrates the desire of who gave that gift to you. There's no worse tragedy than a gift that remains unopened. That's valuing certainty more than growth. And if we have to give a name to the price that we pay for not opening up our gift, it is the lack of growth. You cannot grow without falling, without ruptures, without risks. We were made to grow. In fact, we love to see growth. We cultivate gardens. We love to see trees with green leaves. We value ecological reserves. We love to see newborns grow. That baby was just crying and drooling yesterday. And now they're able to walk and talk. As parents, we get excited, even though in years we'll mourn that they never shut their mouths. But years ago, the temple was semi-empty, and we conformed, saying, oh, well, a nice little group is coming. That's a phrase that us pastors use to justify a small group. Oh, it's a nice group. I always asked myself what an ugly group looks like. But now you have to get here early, you have to find a parking spot, you have to wait in line. What a blessed complication of growth. But at the same time, there are a few things sadder than stagnation. A gift that remains unopened. It's as if we lived half of our lives waiting for the other half to begin, which is ahead of us, which never begins. But life is that which passes us by while we watch Netflix series or marathons, or we look at other people's lives on Instagram, people that we barely know. That's life. Life is what passes us by while we're on social media. Life is what passes us by while we lose hours watching a series. I'm not against entertainment. I'm just saying that that's what's life. What happens meanwhile. And for it to be an alert to everyone, Jesus tells a story about an executive magnate with 3 servants. The story is very popular. It appears in Matthew 25:14, and it tells us how each one of them is given a generous opportunity to get off that boat. The pattern, the boss, gathers his 3 servants and he gives them different sums of talents. He gives 5 talents to the first, 2 talents to the second, and 1 talent to the third. 1 talent is equivalent of 15 years of salary. He was basically putting his assets in their hands. And so the numbers that Jesus is mentioning are astonishing. This magnate was Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or Mark Zuckerberg. He entrusted them with his fortune and then he left. It's an occasion for everybody to practice initiative, to get off the boat, to manage their abilities in the market. Because when you receive a big inheritance, and if you were a worker your entire life, an employee that lived from paycheck to paycheck, and they give you a fortune, that fortune can be dilapidated in less than 3 months, or you'd better learn how to manage it and how to manage that money. And you might be thinking, oh, give me money and I don't know what to do with it. No. If not, there wouldn't be lottery winners that went back to poverty after some time. Athletes, soccer players, boxers, that because they didn't have somebody to help them manage their money, they went back to being as poor as they were before they earned those fortunes. Not everyone can manage a great a net full of fish. This is an act of trust without precedent. Up until that moment, these gentlemen only received commands. Go there, do this, park my horses here, put the cows in their places, feed the chickens, feed the pigs. Their lives were full of calm, comfort, commands, few responsibilities. There are people that say, oh yeah, I love leaving at 5 p.m. and not thinking about work until the next morning. Nobody that thinks this way will have more money than what is necessary. Maybe the first employee went to his wife and said, My wife. I was never in a position like this to plan anything. Let's take some risks, you get it? Yeah, you know, we weren't hungry, but we were desiring for more. The boss did something that I thought he would never do. I don't know if it's because he doesn't have kids or maybe he fought with his wife, but he called me to his office and he entrusted me with a great portion of his assets, of his fortune. I'm so happy that he had faith in me. This is a great opportunity. And the wife says, hey, but this only happens in movies. Yes, yes, yes. Or in real life. The first employee realized that he was receiving a great gift of porcelain. A high-quality set of pieces made of kaolin and quartz in the Baroque-style Blue Series. This guy realized that it would be crazy to allow anything to interfere from him managing it. Because it's as if you're a single woman and David Beckham or Brad Pitt texts you. You won't start praying. Brad Pitt asks, hey, you want to go out? You won't pray. If an Argentinian offers you to trade a pupusa for barbecue, no, you won't pray. You'll give up that pupusa. Well, an employee does this. They don't begin to pray. No, they take advantage of that opportunity. Before the manager reconsiders or changes his opinion, the third employee did not do this. He was like the typical Hispanic. Not you guys, but the typical Hispanic that lives here in the U.S. that becomes picky. They used to go out and fight in the streets of Tijuana, but now they're saying, oh, there's rain. Well, that one. That person received the greatest of all the gifts and buried them in the field. Why would he do something like this? Why would you bury that gift? You're being given money to manage. What makes somebody miss out on the opportunity of their lifetimes? This takes us to a second truth. He forgets that the owner of the gift of the talent will always return. That day always comes. The word says that after a long time, the master returned and brought up the accounts. And it surprises me how easily we forget this. There are many people that have a hesitation towards risk. They say, well, I would develop my gifts if I didn't have a manager or a pastor that's always undermining my initiative. Oh, well, I would find another job, but I'm going to lose my health insurance in the process. Oh, well, I would spend more time on growing spiritually, but I don't have the time. The day's not long enough. I would have developed my potential, but nobody was interested in being my mentor. Nobody wanted to take me in as a disciple. And so we developed the game of when, then I will do this. When, and then. When my leader supports me, then I'll grow. When my partner is more understanding, then I'll be a better partner. And we're waiting on that when to happen because there's never an ideal climate to get off the boat. Generally, it's the opposite. You want to get off because staying on that boat is a certain death. And the Lord will ask us, what did you do with what I gave you? He won't ask our pastor or our partner or our parents or our friends. No, he'll ask us. And there will be no way to justify the burial of gifts, of talents. When the manager questioned the third servant, he offered a different type of rationalization of his passivity. He said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow. So I was afraid and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. The guy wanted a promise that nothing would go wrong, not an order to do what's right. Fear makes it so that people bury the gifts that God gives. Fear makes it so that people disobey the calling from the manager. Nobody in the church is subjected to discipline because they fear. Fear is not part of the 7 capital sins. The Lord never said many times, stop sinning. He never said many times, oh, be careful not to miss the church service. No, but he said, do not fear so repeatedly because fear is the reason as to why we avoid doing what he's asking of us. That's why we have to hear this order, this command, all the time. In the Bible, you'll find this command 366 times. Do not fear. 366 times, arbitrary and surgically placed there, one for each day of the year, including the leap year. A woman feels trapped in a marriage full of abuse, but fear stops her from recognizing reality and seeking help. A young man feels pressured by his parents to follow a career that he does not desire, but out of fear, he avoids bringing it up, and he's capable of studying an entire career and working in something that he does not like for his entire life just to make dad happy. A young woman ends up committed with a man that she does not love. She knows she does not love him. But since the whole world is expecting them to marry, and the whole world told her that he's a good man, and the whole world said to take advantage because she's not at an age to be picky, and that the train is leaving her behind, she marries out of fear. I profoundly admire people that battle, that struggle genuinely against fear, and in the decisive moment, they decide to take that leap. Because if we feel invaded by fear, we're never going to experiment the potential that God has given us. Not too long ago, I was speaking with someone that was called to do great things, a person that was enormously gifted with many, many talents, but they're currently an employee somewhere that's killing them. They cannot grow, they don't feel any passion for what they do, waking up Monday mornings, not because they're lazy, but because Sunday nights are the most depressing nights, because they hate Monday mornings. And so I asked them, why are you still there? And they said, well, I'm not at the age to take risks. But in reality, they're afraid of failure. What if they try something and it doesn't work out well? What if people think that they're doing something stupid? How can you explain that to others? Because it seems like the more we grow, the more explanations we want to give. Instead of buying our freedom, we buy slavery. What if he's not as talented as he thinks he is? I think that in a strange way he's afraid of succeeding, because if he succeeds, people will also expect more from him. And the bets are higher. The pressure increases. People demand that Messi be the best of all time, and Argentinians want him to play better than Maradona. It's not good enough for him to play well. No, he needs to shine. His contract demands it for being the best paid player. FIFA demands it of him, all the brands that back him. A legion of detractors that deploy biting, destructive adjectives demanded from him, and they're not moving a muscle on their couch. They never demand this of a bench warmer, but there are people, that's why there are people that never want to be under the lights. Because they fear succeeding, doing well, because mediocrity and average is the refuge of fear. Who demands something of someone mediocre? I remember that in school we had a nerd. Her name was Silvana in elementary school. And she knew all the answers. She was a human computer. Who knows what she became later on in life? She probably succeeded. But they demanded so much of that girl. The day she forgot something, they would say, "What's going on with you, Silvana? It's strange that you don't know the answer." Now, when I didn't know the answer, it was never strange because I never knew anything. They would always say, "Oh, Gebel, you're always up in the clouds." Yeah, well, yes, teacher. I was just there. They would ask, "Gebel, what's the answer?" No idea. Gebel doesn't learn. So they stopped demanding from me. From that mediocrity, you can criticize the whole world because nobody will ask us to be the example. But we will never do what God had in mind when we were created. And so fear will cost us our destiny, and that's a price too high to pay. Fear is transmitted from generation to generation, and we've learned that from our families, right? What did our mothers say to us when we would go out of the home? Who had a mother that would say, "Son, take risks, become a man today, mature, get beat up, cling on to danger, try to start a fight during recess, be resilient, child, and when you cross the street, only look one way, because that will give you adrenaline, my love." No, what was the maternal advice? Oh, be careful, don't get hurt. Oh, no, don't play with those branches because you might poke someone's eye out. Has anyone in their entire existence met anyone that lost an eye for playing with branches? No! We were raised to live in fear. Fear isn't the only thing that is contagious, but also trust. Audacious faith is also contagious. Everything that we do in faith, our children will imitate. But we run into a great story. Remember when the third servant said, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow. That's why I buried it. The manager didn't say, you misinterpreted me. Or, no. What he answers is, if that's truly what you were thinking, you should have done something. You ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. Jesus points to the fact that this is a smokescreen, an excuse. It's never a real reason this man tries to avoid that traffic ticket. But that will not happen because the Lord, with clear accounts, can never be evaded. Fear is never a valid excuse for the tragedy of a gift that has remained unopened. One of the most interesting things about the story is that the employee is not judged for doing bad things or wrong things. No, he is judged for not doing anything. Oh, well, we didn't provoke the wildfire. Yeah, but if we don't do anything for those that are burning, we're also not good people. And for years, our gospel was the search of holiness by avoiding the sins of commission. And so we sin by omission for not doing anything. We oppose everything, but we don't support anything. Our employee didn't defraud us, he didn't steal from us, but he just buried our talents. And Jesus uses the words, you wicked and slothful servant. Not being good managers of what God has given us, administrators, is what Jesus is pointing out here. This is the story of the sin of a potential that is not taken advantage of, a gift that remains unopened. When teachers want students to grow, they give them problems to solve. They don't give them solutions. And if somebody gives us all the answers, we obtain good grades, but we won't grow. That's why we need to manage our gifts under fire to be able to grow, to mature. I want us to use our imagination for a moment, and let's imagine that our life is ending. And we're guided to a small room in heaven. There are 2 seats, one for us and one for God. And God plays a video called What Your Life Could Have Been. And we see what God could have done had we allowed him. What he could have done with our financial resources had we trusted in God's generosity. We see what we could have done with our talents had we trusted in him. Look, when I was a young boy, from the moment I had reason, I realized that I could draw easily. It came with me. I never studied it. When God equipped me, I knew that in one way or another, I had this gift. Without having to learn it. I'm not saying I'm a Picasso, but God sent me with this fascinating gift that I've always had from a young age. And from a young age, I could draw whatever I wanted. My mother was always astonished because she would say, oh, good thing you weren't a tumor, good thing we didn't abort you. I drew as if I were a professional. And since I always share that I draw, some people ask, oh, well, does he truly do it? Yes, I've done it my entire life from a young age. And I did this as I watched people. It was the first talent that I remember giving to the Lord. And I said, I don't know what good this will be, but I give it to him. And at the age of 15, I told the director of a newspaper, I was 15 years old, I said, I want you to publish my drawings, even for free. And he said, okay. And so I did it, and the crowd loved it so much that he had to hire me. His name was Juan Manuel Santillan. He was my first employer at 15. And later on, I published 2 comic strip books that literally sold by the thousands. I'm not exaggerating, and I made a lot of money being very young. And I always felt the sensation that if things got complicated, I could always go back to drawing. Nothing could get so complicated that I wouldn't be able to draw. If I lost my job or if something happened, I had to learn how to draw twice because my fingers were cut during an accident in the carpentry, so I had to do a whole lot of exercise to recover my left hand. But I always knew that in one way or another, this was the gift that I had and that I could draw anything. I haven't stopped drawing a single day in my life, whether it be on a napkin or while I speak on the phone, because I always say that if one day you don't want to listen to me anymore, I can just draw. The question is, what is it that God has given you and that you need to invest in the kingdom? Maybe your material possessions, maybe an undeveloped potential. Maybe you can use your money instead of to accumulate things. You can help to preach the gospel, to feed the hungry. That's an eternal investment. Or maybe you need to manage your time. Or you can continue to wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, and one good day die. It's time for you to enter the game, and let me tell this to you without beating around the bush. Invest all that you have in God's kingdom. It's the greatest thing that you could ever be presented with. You have to offer what's most valuable. Maybe you won't be too visible, but the Lord of the gifts can take 5 fish and 2 loaves and feed a multitude. The Lord can take 2 coins from a poor widow and turn it into the most important story of all history. He can take a stuttering man named Moses and liberate millions. The Lord can take 12 foolish followers and create a community that propagates throughout the world. You have no clue what it means to get off the boat, whatever it is. Getting off the boat is marvelous. And to finish, I'm going to give you a small poem, maybe the saddest one ever written, but it's worth it. It's relevant. At first, they attributed it to Jorge Luis Borges, but they think that the true author is Don Harold. It says, if I could live my life again, I would try to make more mistakes. I wouldn't try to be so perfect. I would relax more. I would take few things seriously. I would take more risks. I would travel more. I would contemplate more sunsets. I would climb more mountains. I would swim in more rivers. I would go to more places that I've never been before, and I would have more real problems than imaginary problems. I was once one of those people that lived carefully and prolifically each minute of their lives, and I was also a person that never went anywhere without a thermometer, without a cup of hot water, an umbrella, and a parachute. But if I lived again, I would live with more risks. And to this poem I would add, when I look behind, when I look back, and I see a conversation, or I see a life full of deep conversations that I never had, great and solid prayers that I never said, stimulating risks that I never took, and lives that I never touched, I'll feel sad because I will see myself sitting in a recliner with a sad life and an old TV that bores me, and I realize that out there was a world full of need and a great God that called me to be a part of something greater than myself. I see the person that I could have been, but I am not, because I became in a barrier of gifts. An entire life that was a porcelain set, translucent, high-quality piece made of kaolin and quartz in the Baroque style Blue series, but I spent so much time underground taking refuge from my fears, and now that I'm dying I realize that this fine porcelain was never used and never will be used. Please, let's not make up a part of the drug addiction of this century. You don't want to be a barrier of gifts. You don't want to be an old pirate that buries these old gifts. Let's take the risks. Let's get off the boat. Let's jump into the void. Let's follow the Lord's call in this season of risks. Let's give thanks to the King of Kings. Let's go! Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate the King! Hallelujah! Give a grand applause to the Lord of Lords. Give a grand applause and say, Lord, there is faith. There are commands to get off the boat. Blessed are you. Whoa! Impressive. We exalt you, King. We exalt you, King of Kings. Sweet Spirit of God. Let's lift up our hands and say, Lord, here I am, send me. It seems like such a used resource. We've said it at conferences, at crusades. Lift up your hands, whoever wants to serve God. We've said it at retreats, at camps, at conferences. But now, I must say to you, and I must read the fine print, the Lord says that there will be risks. That things may not end as well as you might have planned. What's more is you'll have to give up your own plans to the Lord. Our plans will be like rags compared to the scenes and moments of risk that He'll take us to. And it's like when you send a secret agent from the CIA or any secret service on a mission, we cannot guarantee that things will turn out well. But we do know that you will be fulfilling your mission, and God is telling us now how many will get off that boat. The Lord is not calling you to do something stupid. He's telling you how many will obey this order of leaving their comforts and commodities and say, I want to do it. It's going to make you tired. It'll demand you hours, or it'll be physically demanding. People say, oh, well, you travel so much, it's tiring. Yes, but it's worth it to waste away for God. What else could I do? If God enlists me in His ranks to serve, am I really going to say, no, but I don't want Him to demand too much from me. I want it to be more pleasant. I don't want to travel too often. And if He gives me the ears of people, I also don't want to speak too much because they'll get tired. No, God says, I need you to stand between the living and the dead. People that will pay the price. People that will dedicate the rest of their lives sacrificially to the Lord, just as many missionaries have done. As people that have left their comforts and have embarked to distant, primitive islands to take the gospel where nobody else would go. Who will go for me, says the Lord? And yes, there may be some plagues. Yes, there may be a whole lot of opposition, even persecution, but God is seeking people that dare to do so, because He knows that in the end He will hold us up like Peter, like He did with Peter. He will say, do not fear, for I am with you. But we will either be those that walk on water or boat addicts. Let's leave our addictions of the boat, our addiction of certainty of what the system tells us. It's not your savings that will keep you safe and alive. It's not that. It's not your retirement that will keep you alive. Don't think that it's your health insurance that is most important. No, the most important thing is God, who has sustained you. And He will add all things that may be necessary. But even then, if there is a time in which you have nothing, you must trust in that God is always present, even if you don't see Him. The sun has been here on the west coast of California all the days. We haven't seen it, but it's behind all the clouds. I was traveling on the plane and the day was sunny until the plane descended below the clouds, and then I saw a storm haunting the place where we live. But the sun is there. What I'm trying to say is that whether we see Him or not, God sustains us. He holds us up. He blesses us. God is in control. God allows the rain. God allows the plane to move. God allows the turbulence. God allows that boat to move around. It was God's original idea for that boat to tip and turn, for you to say it's time to get off. Blessed are those that make this decision before 30, before 40, but blessed are those who at 70 say, I'm still not too old to not take these risks. I can still do it. I still have not died. There are things that I can do, and I care less about what people say. Come on, let's go. It's God's time, here or at home. receive this word on behalf of the Lord. Father, thank you. You've brought us here. You've blessed us. And I've transmitted this word just as you dictated it to me. Lord, look at the hands that lift up today. Seal them with your Spirit. Pour out your glory. Whoa, moment by moment upon them. Grow. May the passion grow. May the risks grow. Are the people truly here today that say, Lord, I will take these risks? Come on, keep your hand held up high and say, Lord, I don't know what's coming for my life. I have nothing to lose. But if I were to lose a little that I do have, it's worth it to waste away for God. It's worth it to take the risk. It's worth it to leave that addiction of the boat behind. We believe, even though your gift is small, like my gift of drawing, we believe that will open up doors for you, and it'll sit you at a table with kings. That'll sit you at the table with princes. Your gift will open up paths for you, the Bible says. Your gift will open a path for you. That gift will open up a path for you. Hallelujah. More of your Spirit. More of your glory. Seal this word here and at home. Lord, thank you for this. Thank you because you've spoken to us again, because you touch us, because you redeem us, you bless us, because you've never left us. And now you've shaken us up powerfully, saying, I have more. I've transmitted this message, and I believe that it will be a seed and it will grow in your heart. Father, I know that I have sown, but you produce the water, and you water. Bless your children, and may your glory and your presence be upon us now. May you accompany us all the way home. May this word remain in our minds, in our hearts, and in our souls. I know that there are people that will make decisions that are fundamental before the year ends, and these decisions will change your life just as you know it. I'm free of this word. I'm free of your blood. I'm free from your decisions. I've transmitted what I believe God told me to say to you. Now it's something between you and the Lord of the gifts, the Lord of the clear accounts. We believe it, we declare it in the body, in the soul, and in the spirit. Amen. Amen and amen. May God bless you. May He keep you, and the Lord's face shine on you. Bye. Until next Sunday, people. Blessings to bless. Bye.